Hello horse racing fans and newcomers interested in the sport of kings. Today I am going to be talking about the most famous horse race in America, the greatest 2 minutes in sports, the first Saturday in May, the Kentucky Derby. With this year being its 149th running, there are few sporting events with as long of a history. Today, I will do my best to cover the basic facts of the Kentucky Derby, as well as the weird and obscure. I present to you 100 facts about the Kentucky Derby. Number 1. The Kentucky Derby is the longest continually held sporting event in America, running uninterrupted since 1875. Second place is the Westminster Kennel Dog Show, uninterrupted since 1877. Number 2. The Kentucky Derby is the first jewel of horse racing's Triple Crown, which consists of the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. 13 horses have currently won the Triple Crown. Number 3. The inspiration for the Kentucky Derby was the Epsom Derby held in England since 1780. Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. used this and other big races in England as the basis for the creation of Churchill Downs and their opening meet, which featured the Kentucky Derby. Number 4. If you're quick to recognize names, the creator of the Kentucky Derby, Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr., is in fact the grandson of William Clark from the Lewis and Clark expedition. It's also the reason for the name of another big Churchill Downs race, the Clark Handicap. Number 5. The Kentucky Derby starting gate with the most wins is number 5, which has 10 winners so far, most recently, Always Dreaming in 2017. Number 6. Only 3 horses have run the greatest 2 minutes in sports in under 2 minutes: Secretariat, Sham, and Monarchos. The fastest of these Kentucky Derbies was Secretariat with a time of 1:59.4. Number 7. The Apollo Curse is a superstition named after the 1882 Kentucky Derby winner, Apollo, who never ran at the age of 2. It took 136 years for this to be replicated with Justify in 2018, who did one better, not racing as a 2-year-old and then going on to win the Triple Crown. Number 8. In total, 40 fillies have ran in the Kentucky Derby. This ain't just a boys' sport. Most recently, Devil May Care ran in 2010. Out of those 40 fillies, only 3 have won: Regret in 1915, Genuine Risk in 1980, and Winning Colors in 1988. Number 9. 3 people who bet on Winning Colors to win the Kentucky Derby in 1988 accidentally made the wager with Mexican cartel members. This true story became the best-selling novel, the greatest gambling story ever told. Number 10. The 1932 Kentucky Derby is nicknamed the Unlucky Derby, partly due to the winner, Burgoo King, wearing saddlecloth number 13, and also because of the suspicious deaths of 2 jockeys who rode in the race, one of them being Burgoo King's jockey. Number 11. While dubbed the first Saturday in May, it took till the 21st running for this to happen. Number 12. If you want to go further, the 1901, 1945, and 2020 Kentucky Derbies were not run in the month of May at all. Number 13. The 1901 Kentucky Derby was the earliest derby ever held, being run on April 29th. The winner was His Eminence, and he was ridden by famous African-American jockey Jimmy Winkfield. Number 14. The 1945 Kentucky Derby was the only time the Derby was ever run in June. The delay came because of World War II. The winner was Hoop Jr., named after his trainer Fred Hooper's son. Number 15. In very recent memory, the 2020 Kentucky Derby was the latest Kentucky Derby running, being run on the first Saturday of September due to COVID-19. Number 16. For the first Saturday in May in 2020, with no Kentucky Derby, they instead ran a rerun of the 2015 Kentucky Derby broadcast, and did a virtual matchup featuring all 13 Triple Crown winners. The winner was, of course, Secretariat. Number 17. The only saddlecloth number without a Kentucky Derby winner is number 17. The closest we've had was 'Tis the Law in 2020, and technically 49er who broke from gate 17 but wore number 1A. Both of them were second, behind Winning Colors and Authentic respectively. Ironically, saddlecloth number 21 has more Derby wins than 17, despite 20 horses being allowed to run. Number 18. The Kentucky Derby is currently famous for being 1.25 miles, but its first 21 runnings were at 1.5 miles, the same distance as the third jewel of the Triple Crown, the Belmont Stakes. The fastest of these 1.5 mile Kentucky Derbies was in 1889, when Spokane stopped the clock in 2 minutes 34.5 seconds. Number 19. Spokane remains to this day the only Montana-bred winner of the Kentucky Derby. There are also many weird urban legends about him, one saying that he outran a cougar when he was a yearling, another saying that he got all of his strength from tea that he was fed, and another that stated that he was a spirit horse. Number 20. Besides Montana, Kansas, Illinois, Missouri, and Ohio also only have a single Kentucky Derby winner to their name. Number 21. 4 Kentucky Derby winners were bred outside of the United States, 2 in Canada and 2 in England. Number 22. The Kentucky Derby wasn't always such a famous horse race. With genius marketing by Colonel Matt Winn, he made it huge with the 1915 Kentucky Derby, when Regret made the front page as the first filly to win the Kentucky Derby. After that, the rest was history. Number 23. The smallest Kentucky Derby field is a tie between the 1892 and 1905 runnings, with just 3 horses in them. The winners of those races were Azra and Agile. Number 24. Although nowadays the number of horses allowed in the Kentucky Derby is 20 at maximum, the record for the most entries in the Kentucky Derby was in the 100th running, with 23 runners. Cannonade was the winner that day. Number 25. The most times the Kentucky Derby has been won by a trainer is a tie between Bob Baffert and Ben Jones, who both have won 6 Kentucky Derbies. However, if things played out differently, Bob Baffert could have had 8, losing the 1996 Kentucky Derby by just a nose, and losing the 2021 Kentucky Derby by disqualification. Number 26. Ray Count and Omaha both raced in England after winning the Kentucky Derby, and won. Omaha won the Queen's Plate and the Prince of Wales Stakes, while Ray Count won the Coronation Cup. They both also came second in the Ascot Gold Cup, a race that is 2.5 miles long, or quite literally, the length of 2 Kentucky Derbies back-to-back. Number 27. The 1923 Kentucky Derby winner Zev had a match race against the 1923 Epsom Derby winner Papyrus. Zev got the home court advantage, with the race taking place at Belmont Park, and Papyrus could not adjust to the Belmont track in time. He was beaten by 5 lengths. Number 28. African American jockeys were a major part of the Kentucky Derby start, with 13 of the first 15 horses in the Derby being ridden by African Americans. Number 29. African American jockeys won 15 of the first 28 Kentucky Derbies, with the last one being Jimmy Wingfield on Alana Dale in 1902. Following this, a steep decline in African American jockeys occurred, unfortunately due to a combination of Jim Crow laws and racism on the tracks. Number 30. The 1930 Kentucky Derby was the first year the Kentucky Derby used starting gates. Before this, horses were lined up behind a tape that was raised to start the race. The winner of that year's Derby was the eventual second Triple Crown winner, Gallant Fox. However, the modern mechanical starting gate didn't come around until 1941, when coincidentally, the winner of that race was another Triple Crown winner, Whirlaway. Number 31. The most times a trainer has saddled a Derby horse and not won was Steve Asmussen, who has yet to win despite entering 24 horses in the Derby so far. Corey Nakatani is the most losing Derby jockey, with 18 mounts and not a single win. Together, these two teamed up to be second in the 2011 Kentucky Derby, with Nero. Number 32. In the history of the Kentucky Derby, 6 female jockeys have managed a Derby mount. The best finish from a female jockey was in the 2013 Kentucky Derby, when Rosie Napravnik rode My Lute to a 5th place finish. Number 33. The 1933 Kentucky Derby winner Broker's Tip has a distinct honor of only ever winning a single race in his career, the Kentucky Derby. Number 34. On 9 occasions, the closest margin of finish, a nose, occurred in the Kentucky Derby, with it most recently occurring when Grindstone nosed out Cavanier. Number 35. Only 3 Kentucky Derbies have resulted in the disqualification of the winner. The 1968 and 2021 Kentucky Derbies both had disqualifications due to drug infractions, and in 2019, Maximum Security lost his Kentucky Derby due to interference on the far turn. Number 36. The day before the Kentucky Derby, a female equivalent called the Kentucky Oaks is run. In total, 7 jockeys have won both in the same year. Most recently, Calvin Burrell on Rachel Alexandra and Mind That Bird in 2009. The 2 horses then ended up facing off against each other in the Preakness Stakes, with Rachel and Calvin Burrell coming out on top. Number 37. Calumet Farm is the most successful breeder of Kentucky Derby winners, with 10 in total. Most recently, they took last year's Kentucky Derby with 80-1 shot, Rich Strike. Number 38. No horse starting with the letter X has ever ran in the Kentucky Derby. Number 39. 2006 Kentucky Derby winner Barbaro was named after a foxhound his owner's family once owned of the same name. Number 40. No horse starting with letters Q, X, or Y have won the Kentucky Derby, and only one horse starting with the letters U or Z have won the Kentucky Derby. Those were Unbridled in 1990 and Zev in 1923. Number 41. The letter on the alphabet with the most winners is S at 19, most recently done by Super Saver. Number 42. The least amount of times a horse raced before winning the Kentucky Derby is 2, which was done by Leonidas in 1883. He is also noted for eating flowers after winning his Kentucky Derby that were originally meant for his owners. Number 43. The blanket of roses given to the winner of the Kentucky Derby was introduced in 1896 when Ben Brush won. However, his roses were not red, they were pink and white. The 1904 Kentucky Derby would be the first year to have red roses. Number 44. The biggest winning streak going into the Kentucky Derby was done by Mr. Frisky at 16 straight races. He didn't win though, Unbridled did. The biggest winning streak by a Kentucky Derby winner was Morvich, who won 11 straight races before making his 12th straight win, the Kentucky Derby, although he never won again afterward. He was also known as an ugly cripple as a foal. Number 45. Only 3 Kentucky Derby winners have ran over 100 times in their lives: Macbeth II, Judge Himes, and Danow, with Danow running the most at 111. Number 46. The 1946 Kentucky Derby winner and Triple Crown winner Assault had a deformed right front hoof throughout his life after he impaled it on a surveyor stake as a foal. This gave him the nickname of the Club-Footed Comet. He also was the first of 2 Texas breds to win the Kentucky Derby. The second one was Middle Ground in 1950. Number 47. In the 1975 Kentucky Derby, racing announcer Chick Anderson mistook foolish pleasure for a horse named Prince Thou Art, calling him as the winner until the final 50 yards.
It's Prince Thou Art holding the lead on the inside Avatar. At the wire, Prince Thou, now Foolish Pleasure to the lead, Avatar.
Number 48. In the 1948 Kentucky Derby, jockey Eddie Arcaro didn't have Citation as his first choice. Instead, he wanted to ride his stablemate, Coletown, but he was told by Ben Jones, "If I thought you should be on Coletown, you would be on Coletown." Arcaro would go on to win the Kentucky Derby on Citation, en route to winning the Triple Crown. Number 49. The Kentucky Derby winner with the most career wins was Exterminator, who won 50 of his 99 career races. Second place was Old Rosebud, who won 40 of 80 races. Number 50. 50 to 1 were the odds that Mind That Bird won at in the 2009 Kentucky Derby. 50 to 1 also became the title of a feature-length movie based off of Mind That Bird. Number 51. The movie 50 to 1 made just over $1 million at the box office, which isn't even half of what Mind That Bird the horse earned on the racetrack, $2.2 million. Number 52. As of 2022, out of the 112 gray horses entered, 8 have won the Kentucky Derby, although some have been falsely recognized as roan horses, most famously Winning Colors, who was most definitely gray. Number 53. The most famous Kentucky Derby photo, the fighting finish, was taken when a photographer slid under the rail and onto the track before rolling back under. This photo has now become the most requested reprint from the Courier-Journal archives. Number 54. The 1935 Kentucky Derby winning jockey, Willie Saunders, went on trial for accessory to murder only 5 months after his victory. After a night of drinking with his buddy, he picked up 2 girls, and they drove off, but one of them threw up, so they left her in the middle of the road and went on without her, before soon after making a U-turn on the same road. Later that night, she was found run over. They were found not guilty. Number 55. Before the Triple Crown ever became official, in 1917 and 1922, the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness were run on the same day. Number 56. The Preakness has been run before the Kentucky Derby 11 times, despite it now being the second jewel, with the last time being in 1931. Number 57. When Gallant Fox won the Triple Crown in 1930, he won the Preakness 9 days before the Kentucky Derby, making it the only time that a Triple Crown winner won the 3 races in that order. Number 58. Tim Tams are a brand of chocolate biscuit made in Australia. Their name comes from Ross Arnott, who watched the 1958 Kentucky Derby and thought that the winner, Tim Tam, would be a great name. They are now ranked the most popular biscuit per capita. Number 59. In 1904, owner Laska Durnell and breeder Emma Holt Prather became the first female owners and breeders respectively to win the Kentucky Derby. The horse, Elwood, was the longest shot of the 5 horses running that day, and to this very day is the only horse bred in Missouri to win the Kentucky Derby. Number 60. In 2015, Jimmy Fallon had a bit where he used puppies to predict the winner of the Kentucky Derby. They predicted correctly that American Pharoah would win. Ironically, in 2018, the puppies predicted Mendelssohn would win. Mendelssohn finished last. Number 61. Currently 4 horses based in Japan have run in the Kentucky Derby, starting with Ski Captain in 1995. The best finisher so far has been Master Fencer in 2019, who finished 6th. This year could be the first year with more than one Japanese import in the race. Number 62. The jockeys with the most Kentucky Derby wins is a tie between Eddie Arcaro and Bill Hardtack at 5. As well as guiding 5 Kentucky Derby winners, Eddie Arcaro rode 2 Triple Crown winners, Whirlaway and Citation. Number 63. After winning the 1947 Kentucky Derby, Jet Pilot kicked a police officer in the pants. Ouch. Number 64. The 1964 Kentucky Derby winner Northern Dancer was a great racehorse, but an immortal sire. In this year's Kentucky Derby, every horse in it has Northern Dancer in their pedigree. Number 65. The longest priced favorite in the Kentucky Derby was Lookin' at Lucky in 2010, who was 6-1, but the longest priced favorite to win was Orb in 2013, who was 5-1. For the shortest priced favorite, it's a 5-way tie at 2-5, including 2 Triple Crown winners, Count Fleet and Citation. Number 66. The greatest winning margin in the Kentucky Derby is 8 lengths, and it was done 4 times by Old Rosebud, Johnstown, Whirlaway, and Assault. Number 67. Before the 1941 Kentucky Derby, Ben Jones spent tons of time on Whirlaway in preparation to try and fix his bad habits, such as him liking to drift to the outside. To combat this, he forced the horse to run through on the inside of a lead pony rather than on the outside, and only cutting out his right blinker so that he could only see the inside. Number 68. In the 1896 and 1994 Kentucky Derbies, the horse who finished last was named Ulysses. However, the spellings were different. Even after nearly a century, the more things changed, the more they stayed the same. Number 69. Johnny Longden rode Count Fleet to victory in the 1943 Kentucky Derby and later the Triple Crown. 26 years later, he would train the 1969 Kentucky Derby winner, Majestic Prince, becoming the only person to both ride and train a Kentucky Derby winner. Number 70. The way Eddie Arcaro got the mount on Citation is darker than you'd think. His original jockey leading up to the Derby was Al Snyder, but he went on a boating trip less than 2 months before the Derby, and was never seen again. Number 71. The slowest Kentucky Derby at 1.25 miles was Stone Street in 1908, with a final time of 2 minutes 15.2 seconds. But the slowest Kentucky Derby of all time was the 1891 Kentucky Derby at 1.5 miles, set by Kingman, with a time of 2 minutes 52.25 seconds. Number 72. While Penny Chinnery is most famous for owning Secretariat, she actually had a closer relationship to his stablemate, Riva Ridge, saying, quote, "Secretariat belonged to the people, and Riva Ridge belonged to me." Number 73. Most people know that Secretariat's heart weighed more than twice that of the average horse, at 22 pounds, but what most people do not know is that Sham also had a large heart, but it was only 18 pounds. Can that horse catch a break? Number 74. The highest attended Kentucky Derby in history was the 2015 Kentucky Derby, with 170,513 people attending. And the winner of that year's Kentucky Derby would be eventual Triple Crown winner, American Pharoah. Number 75. In the very first Kentucky Derby, Aristides was meant to be a rabbit for his stablemate, Chesapeake, who was a closer and the better horse. Instead, Aristides won the race outright. Number 76. In 2007, Universal Pictures announced that they were going to make a movie about 2006 Kentucky Derby winner Barbaro called Gone Like the Wind. However, after the initial announcement, nothing was ever heard of the project afterward. Number 77. The 1977 Kentucky Derby and eventual Triple Crown winner Seattle Slew originally had a few other names. Around the barn when he was younger, he, quote, looked like a duck, so he was called Baby Huey. Eventually, the name Seattle Slew was chosen because of the city that both of his owners lived in, and in reference to sloughs, which are slow-moving bodies of water used for logging. And Mickey Taylor, one of the owners of Seattle Slew, used to be a logger. The last piece was changing the spelling to make it easier to pronounce. Number 78. Although Affirmed is now famous for beating Aladar in all 3 jewels of the 1978 Triple Crown, in the Kentucky Derby, Aladar was the favorite. Number 79. 1979 Kentucky Derby winner Spectacular Bid loved donuts. Buddy Delp, his trainer, said that glazed was his favorite. He also was allowed to eat chocolate donuts, even though chocolate is poisonous to horses. Number 80. The last time a Triple Crown winner sired a Kentucky Derby starter was Quintana, sired by Affirmed in 1991. Ironically, Affirmed's rival Aladar sired the winner that year, Strike the Gold. But this year, Verifying gets a chance to run in the Kentucky Derby and end the drought, being sired by the most recent Triple Crown winner, Justify. Number 81. 134 geldings have started in the Kentucky Derby, with 9 of them being winners, starting with Vagrant in just the second running of the Kentucky Derby, and most recently Mind That Bird in 2009. Number 82. Winners of the Florida Derby have won the Kentucky Derby 24 separate times, most recently with Always Dreaming. Number 83. 9 horses have won the Kentucky Derby while being undefeated, but Justify is the only one to retire unbeaten. Number 84. The most expensive horse in history was no surprise a Kentucky Derby winner. It was the 2000 Kentucky Derby winner Fusaichi Pegasus, who after being sold for $4 million as a yearling and winning the Kentucky Derby, was retired and sold to Coolmore Stud for $70 million. Number 85. In 1985, after winning the Kentucky Derby, Spendabuck was offered $2 million to run in the Jersey Derby instead of the Preakness Stakes. He took the offer and won the race. It is the only time in history this has happened. Number 86. The oldest Kentucky Derby winning jockey was Bill Shoemaker, who was 54 years old when he won his last Kentucky Derby on Ferdinand in 1986. Number 87. The 1956 Kentucky Derby winner, Needles, got his name after he caught equine pneumonia at just 5 weeks old, among other ailments. He would be raised back to health by, you guessed it, injecting tons of needles into his body, by his owner's wife, who happened to be a nurse. Eventually, after enough times doing this, she began to feel really sorry for the poor horse, which eventually led to his name of Needles. He paid them back greatly, winning the Kentucky Derby, the Belmont, and being inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame. Number 88. Since 1982, 4 one-eyed racehorses have participated in the Kentucky Derby. Castilleria, Pollard's Vision, Storm and May, and Patch. None finished very well though, the best finisher being Castilleria, who was 13th. Number 89. On the track, most people remember Sunday Silence for his win in the Kentucky Derby and his 4-race rivalry with Easy Goer. However, in Japan, he is known for a different reason, being sold there as a stud, and then becoming Japan's leading sire for 13 consecutive years. It is believed that 70% of all Japanese broodmares can be traced back to Sunday Silence. This includes both Japanese imports in this year's Kentucky Derby, Dermastotagake and Mandarin Hero. Number 90. Before Carl Nafsker trained unbridled and street sense to victories in the Kentucky Derby, he was a professional bull rider for 12 years, qualifying for the National Finals Rodeo 3 separate times. Number 91. The biggest upset in Kentucky Derby history was in 1913. Despite being told to, quote, run for cornbread, jockey Roscoe Goose guided Donerail to victory in the Kentucky Derby at odds of 91-1. Number 92. The youngest jockey to win the Kentucky Derby was Alonzo Clayton, who rode Azra to victory in the 1892 Kentucky Derby at just 15 years old. Number 93. Until 2020, the Kentucky Derby featured an auxiliary gate for posts 15 to 20. Now it has one big 20-horse starting gate. Number 94. In page 363 of Stephen King's novel 11/22/63, the 1960 Kentucky Derby winner Venetian Way is briefly mentioned as the main character, Jake Epping, wins $10,000 when he bets him to beat the favorite, Bellyache. Number 95. Rich Strike became the first Kentucky Derby winner to be bought out of a claiming race to then win the Kentucky Derby. Number 96. Rich Strike came from 17 1/4 lengths off the leaders in the 2022 Kentucky Derby. 17 1/4 lengths was also his exact margin of victory in his only other win, which also came at Churchill Downs. Number 97. In Back to the Future 2, when Marty McFly watches a brief video about Biff Tannen taking over Hill Valley, a horse race is shown to illustrate his first gambling success with the Gray Sports Almanac. The horse race used is the 1946 Kentucky Derby, won by Assault. Number 98. The Kentucky Derby is also very briefly mentioned in American Psycho as where the character of Elizabeth met Paul Allen.
We met at, at the Kentucky Derby in 85 or 86.
Depending on the year, it was either when Spendebuck or Ferdinand won the Kentucky Derby. She soon after gets murdered. Number 99. Mint juleps officially became the signature drink of the Kentucky Derby in 1939, but their association with horse racing dates as far back as 1816, nearly 60 years before the Kentucky Derby. And finally, number 100. Although the Kentucky Derby is the longest continuously held sporting event in America, there is one horse race that's been continuously held for longer. That would be the King's Plate in Canada. Just like the Derby, it is the first jewel of a Triple Crown, and has been held continuously since 1860. That is almost 15 years longer than the Kentucky Derby. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something new about the first Saturday in May. Who do you got in this year's Kentucky Derby, and what was your favorite fact? Leave your answers in the comment section below. I will see you guys next time. Happy racing!